everyone to the Finance Committee meeting of October 21st, 2025. May I have a roll call, please?
Yes, committee member Santa Maria.
Here.
Vice Chair Harmon is not present. Chair Friedman.
Here. And Vice Chair Harmon is expected to be here shortly, for those wondering. And may I first have general public comment? Is there anybody who wishes to speak to items not on today's agenda but under the purview of the Finance Committee? I don't see any in chambers. Is there anybody online? Please raise your hand in the app.
Chair Friedman, no hands are raised.
Okay, I will close general public comment. And since this is a continued item and we will be having public comment continued again as well, I thought it would be a good idea to have our finance director just give a recap of last week, not the full presentation, but just the overview, so that for those who weren't here last week or online or watching this, that they have just a general understanding of what it is we're discussing and everything. So I'm going to turn it over to Mr. DiMartini for a brief overview.
Thank you very much, Chair Freeman, members of the committee. My name is Keith DiMartini. I'm the city's finance director. I'm here with Ms. Natalia Glusik, the city's budget manager. And for members of the public that weren't able to join us last week or people in the room, I just want to give a really brief overview of the discussion points from last week's presentation, and then just talk about the matter at hand today, where we're hoping that the finance committee will give some direction to staff about some of the recommendations that staff presented to you last week. And so just by way of the request to the Finance Committee is to to receive a report from staff regarding the general fund multi-year forecast. We went into quite some detail about pressures on our revenues and how our expenses continue to rise and how our forecast has been altered over the last couple of months based on some recent actions and decisions. And then we're looking for direction to staff regarding ways of helping balance the budget in the future. And so these are the items that we walk through, and I'm just going to pull up the general fund multi-year forecast graph just to start. We talked through how we ended up in the general fund over the last couple of years and what the adopted budget showed for fiscal year 26, which was close to a balanced budget at the time it was submitted. And then due to changes going on in the local economy, particularly flat sales tax and our transient occupancy tax coming in not necessarily as strong as we had originally projected. Those are factors that are maybe driving some of our revenue to not achieve what our budget goals were. Also on the expenditure side, costs continue to rise, and in particular, the recently adopted memorandum of understanding for the public safety bargaining units. What was included in those MOUs exceeds the assumptions that were in the fiscal year 2026 and fiscal year 2027 adopted budget. So that will increase our expenditures going forward, hence the need for this conversation. This conversation was first agendized from a city council action in a special meeting that occurred back in July, where the city council took an action to appropriate $500,000 from the Flexible Housing Fund for immigration support services. And so that was the original request to have this conversation. However, because of these recent revenue and expenditure trends, it really required a more comprehensive, robust process to help us balance the city's budget through looking at a variety of different revenue generating and expenditure control options, which is the reason why we are here today. So skipping ahead, I wanted to talk about how the staff recommendations are structured. Each staff recommendation, there are more than 200 of them. They're included in attachment 1 to your council agenda packet today. We tiered them into these 3 tiers, as you can see here. Tier 1 are the ones that we believe can be implemented fairly quickly, such as within the next 6 to 12 months. Tier 2 are ones that may take a little bit more time, but we do believe that they're worth exploring and then eventually implementing in the future. And then Tier 3 are items that staff is not recommending at this time necessarily, but we want to keep them on the list. We want them to be considered for future budgetary conversations that the council may need to grapple with in the future. And so with that, staff is here to answer questions, myself and Ms. Glusik. We also have staff from many other departments that are in the audience today if you have specific departmental questions. We are here to support the conversation and also help the committee members craft a motion to help sort of organizing it when you get to that point.
Great, thank you for the overview. And for those watching online or who were here last week, if you want more detailed staff presentation, you go to last week's Finance Committee presentation, and the more detailed staff presentation is at the start of the hearing from last week. All right, so I'm going to open it up to public comment, and then we'll get into questions and comments from my colleagues, and I'll give a little direction at that point on how to structure the meeting so we can be more efficient and also get to where we want to be and some good recommendations to the full council. So I only have two in-house, so if anybody else in chambers wants to speak, please put a speaker slip in. And if you are online, please raise your hand in the app. First up is Barbara Cronin-Hirschberg, followed by Zach Smith. And since we do have the full time, you will have the full 3 minutes.
Thanks. I'm Barbara Cronin-Hirschberg, president of the Friends of the Santa Barbara Library. When I was thinking of how to structure my remarks today, I remembered one of my favorite books from when I was teaching, called The Important Book by Margaret Wise Brown. The important thing about libraries is that they are often one of the only free, welcoming public spaces where everyone is treated with dignity. They can be lifelines for marginalized populations, offering both immediate support and long-term opportunities for growth. Libraries provide a library card of your choice, free internet access, quiet work areas, art displays, the library of things, restrooms, and a place to take refuge from the weather. Librarians develop programs based on the needs and interests of the community, make social service referrals, help with job searches, and go out into the city to interact with and provide services to patrons. They offer services for immigrants and newcomers, including tutoring and conversation groups, multilingual materials and collections, cultural programs, community resource fairs, and referrals to a variety of organizations. Libraries also host children's story times, teen spaces and activities, maker spaces and technology labs, the Orton Gillingham tutoring for 1st through 4th grade, workshops for adults, and career online high school programs for students to earn their diplomas. The ability to read and write is more than a skill. It's a stepping stone to learning, growth, and success in every aspect of life. But the important thing about the libraries is that they are often one of the only free, welcoming public spaces where everyone is treated with dignity. They can be lifelines for marginalized populations, offering both immediate support and long-term opportunities for growth. We need and hope the City Council will do their part in providing financial support for this essential community center that serves the needs of our patrons, including the unhoused and the immigrant population. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Cronin-Hirschberg. And next up, Zach Smith.
And Noah, too.
And Noah.
Speaking on behalf.
That's who we really want to listen to.
Can you give me his time? No, I'm just kidding. I don't need that much time. First, I just want to thank you for approaching this issue with care and thoughtfulness and with transparency, too. Putting all of those suggestions out into the public is appreciated. I also want to emphasize that our staff should be consulted with these. Our unions need to be met with and conferred with as terms and conditions of employment change, and a lot of these things are terms and conditions of employment. From last week's discussion, there are two kind of the immediate need and the long-term need, and I think the immediate need, I'm hoping there is some way to get through that immediate need that doesn't impact people. And I think with the long-term need, keeping in mind that all of these items impact people, impact our staff, and that we should move forward trying to reduce those impacts as much as possible. So from my mind, that is revenue generation, and I see some very some things on there that are good, but that is a long-term fix as well. So Again, I just want to emphasize meeting with your stakeholders, meeting with your unions. Again, a lot of these ideas came from them. And trying to guard against impacts to people, whether that is a position left open or reclassified down to a lower level position where someone, might have wanted to be promoted into a higher level position and now they cannot, or that work then transfers down to a lower level employee who's then underclassified while we're dealing with a classification issue. So those items I want to kind of guard against, and also any kind of contracting out. Obviously, there's quick, easy wins there, but there's really sometimes devastating long-term effects where you remove a person that's working for the city and give that specialized job to a contractor who might be cheaper in the first 5 years than the next 5 to 10 years. So while it looks good on paper immediately, it's not a very sound organizational practice, I believe. So I hope you guard against that and really guard against any impacts to people as you look at this issue. Thank you.
Thank you, Noah.
Do you have any thoughts? No? You're good. Thank you.
Thank you for your comments. There are no further in chambers. Is there anybody online that wishes to speak to this item?
Chair Friedman, no hands are raised.
All right, so we will close public comments. For today's discussion, I'll kind of lay out a strategy, and if you have comments on it, please feel free, but this is a recommendation I was going over with our finance director earlier on how to kind of structure our comments. So first we'll do questions that we have for our staff. We have staff from all the departments here. And then we'll get into how to craft a motion for the recommendation to the full council, because this will be going to the full council. And so keep in mind that to the degree on some of these, we want to prioritize some of them. So perhaps up to 5 that you say these are ones we would like you to look at first. Same thing with recommendations that, hey, not at this time. We would recommend against pursuing them at this time. So if there are any that stand out to you, let's have a discussion on those as well. Again, trying to limit it to around 5. It could be a little more, a little less, but just around that to make it manageable. And then based on that, then we will set up a motion or a series of motions depending on where the discussion goes on that. So any questions or any comments on the process?
Oh, on the process?
Yeah.
No.
So- Okay.
Actually, yes, I have a process
Sure.
question. Sorry, thank you. This makes very good sense. We're going to be picking our 5 priorities, but are we safe to assume that recommendations like consider bulk purchasing, I think that seems like it doesn't need to rise to the level of one of my 5, but surely should still be considered. We're not going to put that on the back burner, right? We can do that at the same
Yes.
time? Okay.
Committee Member Harmon, absolutely. And so I think one of the motions that this committee could craft, maybe after you take a motion to tell staff what your top 5 priorities are, and maybe 5 or so ones that you do not want staff to continue to pursue, is to basically blanket recommend that staff pursues all the rest of them.
Okay,
So that's one that we would work on, yes.
Great, thank you so much. Didn't want to use one of my 5 on bulk purchasing.
All right. With that, so we'll open it up to questions. Are there any questions of staff? So Member Harmon.
Thank you. I do have a question. And this is around the cannabis tax increase to 20%. Can we do that automatically with immediate effect, or do we need to go back to the voters?
Yes, Committee Member Harmon, thank you for that question. I will need to confer with the city attorney on that. My understanding is that when the voters approved of the cannabis tax ordinance when it was originally adopted, it authorized the tax to be up to 20%. And then it was an action of the city council that had it be implemented at a tax rate lower than 20%. And so I believe all that is required is that city council would need to adopt a resolution to increase the tax somewhere from where it is today up to the 20% maximum, which is what the voters authorized. And I don't know if the city attorney wants to add to that.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. DiMartini. So my only comment would be, I think that that's correct because the voters did authorize that higher amount. So if council wanted to change the amount and go to the maximum amount that was approved by the voters, wouldn't need to go back to the voters. But I think we would want to do it by ordinance and not resolution. That would be my only.
Okay. I'll just say on that, and then I'll turn it over to my colleagues for questions while I put my list together. That's my number one immediate, like, let's do it today. So I feel quite strongly that that needs to be done. Thank you.
Any questions from members Santa Maria?
Thank you, Chair Friedman. Yes, I had a question for, there is item in the parking section, it says automate harbor main lot completely. And I'm wondering, there's a few other items in here about automating certain lots like that. And I'm wondering if that results in any job losses. Are there folks that are currently working that, are we eliminating those positions so that it's automated, or how would that impact bargaining units?
Commissioner Santa Maria, Mike Wilshire, Waterfront Director. Again, this was kind of like a suite of options that could either reduce costs or add revenues. The intent now would not be to reduce positions. Speaking to the harbor lot specifically, we have one attendant in there. We don't have a plan in the immediate time to automate that completely, but if we were, it would be likely that that position, it is an hourly position, it's likely that it would be absorbed like throughout other waterfront duties. Typically in the waterfront, our hourly positions ebb and flow between summer and winter by, 20 or so up to 60 or so, and so it's kind of a constant changing amount of hourly employees servicing that need.
Right, okay, thank you. Do you have a couple more questions? I'll ask one more and then I'll turn it over to my colleagues. We can sort of popcorn ask the questions. We can all get a chance. Had a question on our short-term vacation rental. There's a couple of items here for that. So we recently, as a council, voted on limiting where those short-term rentals are. This sort of one of these here seems to sort of contradict that. So it says expand permitted short-term vacation rentals to generate additional TOT or transient occupancy tax. Would Ms. McAdoo, you'd probably be the best person to answer this. So I just want to kind of get a sense of how would that work without conflicting with council direction?
So we would come back for a revision to that council direction if that's something that you wanted to pursue. It was just an option that we presented that would be revenue generating. And so by allowing more short-term vacation rentals, that could potentially increase the transient occupancy tax revenue in the community. But again, yes, the council has given us specific direction. That would be, we'd have to come back and make revisions or ask for alternate direction on that.
Okay, thank
May
you.
I just add one point to that, if I may, please? If council's direction is implemented eventually by reducing the geographic area where short-term rental operators can legally operate, it will likely reduce TOT. So it would be a hit to the city's budget.
Right, that makes sense. Okay.
Sorry, could I just chime in on that too? So that would be, I think Mr. DiMartini is referring to the coastal zone area where short-term vacation rentals technically are still not allowed under our zoning code except for where hotels are allowed. But if we did change that to allow them to be permitted, then, the permit process would probably generate fees, But because we do collect TOTs in the coastal zone now, then that would eliminate those TOT revenues.
Okay, thank you. I have another question in the tax-related revenue generation. Ms. McAdoo, probably you're the best person to answer this, but I wanted to get a sense of what the impact to our budget would be for an item that says update the real property transfer tax to a tiered progressive rate system. Do we have, if Mr. DiMartini, please, yeah.
Sure. Yes, Committee Member Santa Maria. So we currently do have a real property transfer tax rate. We are a charter city, so we are allowed to do so. It's basically the minimum amount that most cities who have this tax in the state of California have it. Some cities over the years have implemented an increase to their real property transfer tax rate. It takes a voter initiative or city council approval, and the voters ultimately have to approve of it. And cities have structured it in different ways. They just simply increase the tax amount. That's one way of doing it. So no matter what the property value is, the type of property that changes ownership, that new tax rate would apply. Some cities have implemented what's sort of commonly known as like the mansion tax, to where it's more of a scaled, like a tiered tax, depending on the purchase price of the property. So if a property that changes ownership is maybe $5 million or more, it has a much higher tax rate. And so there's different ways in which the council can approve of putting a ballot measure on election, whether it's sort of a tiered approach or a flat amount. That's why the revenue projection range in attachment 1, it sort of varies because it really kind of depends on the structure of the tax.
Thank you. That's very helpful. In that case, for any, not just for this, but for anything that we would want to take to the voters, is this something that council would have to act on relatively soon? My understanding is that the ballot submission deadline, I believe, is next month, and just wanted to get some clarification on that.
We would not be able to have a revenue measure on the ballot this year. We would have to do it for 2026 when we have a regular city council election. And so there's certain ways that a city could declare like a fiscal emergency and schedule a special election, but we wouldn't be in that circumstance. So we would be targeting next November of 26, and then the deadline to put a measure on the ballot would be early August of next year. But we would, if the council wants to put something on the ballot, we would recommend getting started as soon as possible, because if there's a whole, voter education, we would want to do some polling, things like that. So if that is a choice for the council or the finance committee, we'd like to get started on that right away.
Okay, just to clarify, did you say then in order to put something on the ballot for November 2026, that's what you were talking about, right? For next year?
Correct.
We would have to have something, well, we would want to start as soon as possible, but have something done by August 2026? Is that
Yes,
correct?
so the
Okay.
council we'd have to have all the ordinance, whatever the taxes, everything drafted, the ballot language. The council would have to adopt that probably in late June. It would have to go to the county for acceptance and then put on the ballot by I think it's the first week of August typically.
Okay, perfect. Thank you. That's really good clarification. My last question for now was about our library closures. That was, I don't like seeing that there, but I had some questions about that. So this has the, as an option, right? It's a holiday library closure and then extended beyond that. And this looks like it would be, it says tomorrow? Am I reading that correctly? It says 10/22/2025. Okay. I was like, oh my God, are we deciding? No.
Sorry, Councilmember Santa Maria, that would be 12/22. I apologize for the typo. So it would be
I
in
see.
December.
I see. Okay. And then the extended one would be from 12/22 until, it looks like January 2nd. What do you think as our library director? I just wanted to get your feedback.
Chair, thank you for the question. So similar to what you've heard before, this was just a litany of ideas that we threw out. We costed out if there would be any savings should we follow the rest of the city's closure deadline. We don't have plans to close it for the extended period. We would follow, the city administrator has already given direction to remain open as to when we have good attendance and follow that. We realize we're a good resource for the community, especially with schools out of session. So right now, the recommendation would be to follow our normal closures and some early closures on holidays, but the recommendation would not be an extended one.
Okay. Follow-up question to that. Do you typically see more visitors during this time of the year to the library, or how does that compare to other times of the year?
During the holiday closure specifically?
Well, not during the holiday closure, but during the winter months, let's say.
No, summer's definitely our busiest time of the year. We have a little bit of a lull now, and then we'll have a little bit of a pickup around the Christmas holiday during the first couple of weeks of December. But no, it's not typically our busier season.
Okay, thank you. Just one brief comment. Thank you. Those were all the questions I had for you.
Don't go anywhere, Mr. Bodette. I have a follow-up.
Oh, you know what? Go ahead and make your follow-up, and then I can make comments. That's a lot easier.
Okay, perfect. I have a few questions. So just one for you. It's just on the closures, because this came up at the library advisory meeting last week. The closures that you normally do, those aren't cost savings. They're for, could you explain, they're for maintenance? Can you explain why the library is closed for those few days during the holidays?
Chair, thank you for the question. Yeah, so we do get a little bit of savings just from, you're not absorbing the wear and tear in the building as you normally do when it's open. But we also utilize that time to do some cleaning. We do carpet cleaning. We do some more thorough cleaning during the time. We'll touch up paint. We'll take advantage of the closures to do all those types of maintenance things. So it is useful to leverage sometimes those closures because at some point we do need to fix a building that has a little bit of wear. Lots of love on that building.
Definitely. And that's the normal closures that we do, not above and beyond.
Correct. Our typical kind of holiday closure guidelines.
Perfect. Thank you. So I have a few, or are you done with questions? Or do you have more
Just
questions?
one brief comment, if I may. Those were all the questions I had for you. Thank you. I think as we are prioritizing things either to focus on or to avoid, for me personally, immediately, any impacts to our library, any closures or reduction in services are a big no-no for me personally. I think as one of our commenters said earlier, I mean, they are a vital resource to the community. So one of my recommendations would be, the library, we shouldn't even be looking at the library as a cost-saving measure. If anything, we need to ensure that we protect the library and expand the access to it, because that, in the long run, could be a way to save costs. And as far as balancing our budget, I am encouraged to hear about a progressive tiered tax that the council could pursue. And of course, it wouldn't be a 7-person decision, but rather something that we would allow the voters to decide. And I do believe that is something to consider as something that we should get started on. It's going to take us a long time. We want to do this right and go through the process and make sure everyone has input, that they're able to give that input. So for me personally, that would be a top priority. It's going to take a long time, and I think it's something that we should start working on as soon as possible, like Ms. McAdoo said. Thank you, Chair.
All right. Thank you. A few questions, and then we'll kind of get into deliberations and comments. And I think everybody knows where I stand with libraries, so I not supportive of the extended closure and whatnot. I'm going to ask Mr. Wiltshire to come up. I have two kind of questions for you, since I think some of these might be, if people look at the list, that's an interesting one, or two. The first is if you could just go over the RV campsites issue. That's one I got a couple questions about.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, Chair Friedman, it's not uncommon up and down the coast. You'll get Santa Cruz Harbor. I was just up at Pillar Point Harbor at a meeting, and they've converted portions of their parking lots into RV campsites. Pretty significant revenue generating. There'd be a huge demand here. It aligns with Coastal Commission and the State Lands Commission when it comes to access and use of that space. Agreed, again, back to the litany of options. It may have various opinions from the waterfront community and the community in general. But it is an opportunity to relatively cheaply generate revenue and create another use.
And that is one, because of past issues down there, and I know we have the oversized vehicles and those types of things, if that is something that we pursued through the normal process, there would be significant outreach to the different stakeholders with that, and also evaluation of the potential positives, but also potential impacts that we might incur with that.
Yeah, absolutely. We're kind of paralleling this process with Harbor Commission too. So we brought these revenue ideas to them last week at our meeting, and we're going to kind of do so in the coming meeting. So they'll certainly be involved, which will inherently involve the waterfront community.
Great. So Harbor Commission is looking at these plus the RV.
Same list you were looking
Perfect.
at.
The other question I had for you is cruise ships, since they are mentioned in here, but specifically it's the manifest. And I remember a few years back, it was $5 to $7 per person, regardless of whether or not they came on board or not. Can you tell us where that fee is now, and why, I didn't see it in here, why it really wasn't proposed to increase that fee?
Yeah, a big part, we went through, over the last couple of years, we kind of evaluated cruise ships with the community. Harbor Commission had a number of public meetings. One of the major outcomes was just raise the fees, and so we did. The current fee is $15 per passenger if they get off the ship or not. The community also landed on, community and council also landed on a 20 ship visit per year cap. We're not near that right now. So be it pricing or uncertainty with the business relationship with the city, we're sitting at about 10 or 11 per year. Same for years going forward. So that suggestion was more pointed at not necessarily raising the fees, but if we've kind of agreed on that cap, then engaging with the cruise lines for some sort of certainty for a given amount of time. They typically book 3 to 5 years in advance, and so they wouldn't want that kind of rug being pulled out from under them a year from now if they did have bookings.
That's good feedback, and I would expect that the Harbor Commission will be grappling with that and give us feedback on that. And appreciate the clarification on the manifest fee that has been basically, you've already done the revenue generation there by tripling it in the last few years. So that's what I got for waterfront. I just have a couple more questions. I'm not sure for the issue from sustainability, its take on the transportation planning. And I'm not sure if that would be Ms. Parento or Ms. McAdoo. The question I have is, one, that recommendation, with all the recommendations for sustainability to take on perhaps different current functions in other departments, there's a cap basically of $600,000. Would this be on its own outside that 600, or would it be part of that 600?
Thank you, Councilmember Friedman. Alelia Parento, the Sustainability and Resilience Director. The cap is actually only for the Measure B suggestions. So that's a bit of a misnomer on your spreadsheet. Measure B, there's a lot of recommended things to take on for the general fund through Measure B, and that we would like to cap it at about $600,000 to $700,000 for ongoing costs. There's also a few one-time that are separate. For transportation planning, again, this, as many people have said, this was a spaghetti at the wall exercise. So this was a big lift. We would need a few years to build the SBCE budget to take on that team. So it would be down the line a little bit.
And then I would, that kind of answers my question for now, but a question I would have in the future, I'm fine considering it, but based on that answer, our public works, streets and infrastructure and transportation planning is a critical part of that. So I'd want to understand as you pursue that, if there's any coordination that would fall off with the Public Works Department and Transportation moving over to sustainability, where the best fit for that would be. So that's my comments on that right now. But thank you for the clarification on that versus the Measure B, 600,000. And just two more questions. And then on the voluntary 4-day work week, that came up, and I know there was some public comment that we received over email on that. So my question is, one, it's voluntary, as I understand it, and how would that impact the level of service?
So I think there would be a couple different ways we could approach it. I think we've heard feedback that the every other Friday closing is confusing. So basically, we would close every Friday, so it's consistent. Some folks would work. It would be time for people people would still be working. You could probably make appointments with the Development Services Department, but it would also give an option for employees who are like, you know what, I don't need to work 40 hours a week. I can reduce my schedule, still get full benefits, but reduce my pay. We don't think a lot of employees would take advantage of that, but it would just give that flexibility to be able to allow it. There's also a way to look at it in other departments that are kind of the 24/7 departments, where with a 4-day work week, you could shift people's schedules. So like, for example, at the water treatment plant, you could have folks who worked 4 days, like Friday through Monday, and then we're off the rest. So it gives flexibility to do some more options with scheduling. So there's a couple different ways that I think we'd want to look at it. But for like City Hall and sort of 8 to 5 employees, it would probably be closing every Friday, keeping full hours Monday through Thursday, and then giving folks the option on Fridays to reduce hours.
And then just to clarify again, for those who took that, it would, if you did the 4-day, you wouldn't get the full pay. You would be reducing your pay voluntarily.
Correct.
On it. So,
Correct.
Okay.
Yeah, and it would be purely voluntary. But everyone, their benefits would not be reduced. So they'd still get full benefits, but would reduce pay by the 8 hours.
And then don't go anywhere, Ms. McAdoo. So the last they're kind of tied together. I did have a question on the vacancy tax. This was covered a little bit last week, but also for getting to Councilmember Santa Maria's point about if we were to do a revenue option for the voters to consider next year, the timing. We have a number of different measures on the Tier 3, And I agree with the point that if we wanted to consider those, then we're already kind of behind the game. So could you speak to what the process would be, perhaps in doing a poll on those to get information so we're not going into it uninformed?
Sure. It's relatively easy. I think we worked with a polling firm during the Measure I election. They did several polls for us. That could actually be something that's done within my current signing authority, so we wouldn't necessarily even need to wait to go back to council. So if that's something, and I'm sort of hearing that is something that the committee would like to explore, we could go ahead and start with the polling, because that's something I could authorize under my current contracting ability, with the options that we might want to consider, and then bring that back to council maybe in December along with the recommendations from the Finance Committee.
So we'll add that to the list of discussions for the end.
perfect.
And then I guess, Mr. DiMartini, if you wanted to answer this, just on the vacancy tax, and I guess it would be folded into that poll as well, but specifically, there was some information you had sent to the council studies on it a couple months back on the vacancy tax. And the difference is, for the most part, we're trying to look at revenue generation, organizational efficiencies, and expenditure, controls of expenditures going forward. Can you speak to, although it sounds like it would be a revenue generator, can you speak to, is it more revenue generator, but is it behavioral? What are some of the trade-offs with a vacancy tax in particular?
Yes, Chair Friedman, I'd be happy to. So a vacancy tax is not designed to be a revenue generator. It's designed to change behavior. And so if a tax was to be implemented on a property that is vacant, it encourages the owner of that property to eventually have it become not vacant, right? So that they're not necessarily subject to the tax. So when that occurs, the tax actually goes away, right? So over time, you might see tax go up a little bit, but then over time, as that behavior is changed, the tax actually goes away. It's also a very administratively burdensome program to run, and it's expensive. So we will need a program, we'll need staff, we'll probably need to implement some software to track the status of properties. There'll be like an annual process to assess and validate if properties are still vacant. There's a lot of communication that would have to go back and forth between city staff and the property owners. It's very labor intensive to administer a program like that. There's also a very thin legal track record for these taxes being implemented successfully. There's really only a handful of cities in California that have implemented this tax. So there's not a very long track record.
And Chair Freeman, if I could, I think staff does not recommend looking at a vacancy tax right now. I think there are other revenue generating options that are in fact revenue generating at a very minimal administrative costs that we haven't. So the real property transfer tax increased to the TOT. I think the discussion about a library parcel tax came up. So I think there are still a lot of options the city hasn't pursued that would actually meet the goal of generating revenue. So at this point, I don't think staff recommends even polling on a vacancy tax, because it really is not achieving the goal that the council is looking for, or that staff is.
All right. Thank you. Those are my questions. I'll go to follow-up questions, if there's anybody has follow-up.
Yes.
Member Santa Maria?
Thank you, Chair Friedman. I have a follow-up actually on the vacancy tax for either one of you, but with that vacancy tax, so I hear the reasoning behind maybe not even wanting to poll, but I also want to allow the community to also make that decision for themselves. And I think it's just important for everyone to be on the same page of what that would even mean. So vacancy tax would it be only for residential? Would this also apply to commercial vacancies? Or, is that even possible? Or how would that work?
Yes, Committee Member Santa Maria, it really is up to the City Council on how they would like to craft a potential tax measure. Cities have implemented it both for residential and commercial. Some cities have implemented only for commercial. So you can do it either way.
Okay, and so that would be something left up to the council then, of course taken to the voters. Okay. Did you want to add something, Ms. Magda? Okay, thank you.
Okay, so now we're going to go on to comments. So let's do comments, and what I'd like to do is start out with, to keep it separate, is let's go ahead and start with the prioritization. You mentioned cannabis earlier, so let's go through and just put them all out there. It could be more than 5 that you have. I don't want to limit it to 5 because we're not all going to have the same 5. So let's go ahead and start with those that we want to prioritize. Then we can have a discussion on those and try to whittle that down to 5 Then we'll do the same thing with those that we recommend holding off on or not pursuing. And again, just put them all out there, which you like, and then we'll have those discussions, and then we'll get in, based on that, then we'll go into some motions. Probably be multiple motions, but we'll get there. So Member Harmon.
Thank you, Chair Friedman. Again, this is so awesome. It's just been a really helpful and really great exercise for us to do, and thank you to all our staff for putting this together. Okay, first to start, I definitely didn't bury the lead on this. I feel strongly that we need to increase to the maximum rate allowable our cannabis tax rate. To me, that is the lowest of low-hanging fruit with regards particularly to the tax measures. And I'm not going to make too many sort of asides. I'm going to try really hard not to, but I do want to say I sort of envision, right, if we can do this really, really quickly, in the immediate, we can use the funds or the excess funds generated to backfill the $500,000 that we took out of the local housing trust fund in the immediate until that money is replaced. And then thereafter, it can be an ongoing source. But I see that, to me, as probably the quickest, easiest, and also recognizing that cannabis is not generating the kind of tax that everyone had hoped it had. So I'm not going to be too Pollyanna about that. But I do think that that makes good sense, and it could be a mechanism for us to replace that $500,000 and not have to wait until 2026 and go to the ballot. So that really is number one for me. Second most important is for us to explore the tax measures, and the three specific tax measures, I'm counting this as one item. I'm really interested in polling on the library parcel tax, and for folks who don't know exactly what that means, it's not taxing you to use or to enter the library. It's rather a tax that gets added to your parcel tax that can go toward library funds, so it is not constantly sort of a pawn in the general fund negotiations. So, you know, I continue to believe, as I know my colleagues do, that our library is just an incredible treasure in our community, and that all of us feel that way. And I think that we would all, or I'm interested in finding out in the polling whether it's true that we would be willing to specifically pay for that with a line item. I also would like the TOT increase from, I think, proposed 12 to 16%. I don't know, I'm looking, maybe I have that wrong. Whatever that is, excuse me, polling on that, I'm really interested in. And also, particularly with the polling, if it's possible, to get a sense of how these measures might do were we to do two of them together. I know typically it's not advised to have multiple tax measures on a single ballot, but I think that there is some nuance here when we're talking about hotel occupancy tax and another residence-based tax, either like library parcel tax or real property transfer tax, which is the third tax that I'm interested in exploring. I think probably for me, unlikely that all three of those I would want to put to the ballot, just for pragmatic reasons, but certainly interested in getting polling on that. From a policy perspective, I continue to support and be interested in a vacancy tax, but I feel actually quite strongly that it is important that we don't muddy the waters in this poll between the policy of a vacancy tax. We're trying to change behavior, trying to encourage presence, with what we're doing around these other taxes, which are really about shoring up our budget deficits and generating revenue. And I worry that if we poll on both, I think if I just got that poll, I would say vacancy tax, the way to go. But I don't know that I would necessarily think about the fact that its purpose is not revenue generating, and that ultimately it will not be a mechanism for us to solve any of our budget challenges. So I say all that to say I'm really excited and interested in having the policy conversation around a vacancy tax at some point. But I would like us to go forward on the polling with those other three tax measures. And I would love, if you're taking a straw poll, Chair Friedman, for us to give direction to begin that process immediately or as soon as possible. All right, I'll move more quickly through some of the other ones. I am interested in the RV campsite conversation. and I realize that's maybe a little controversial. I was almost scared to say it out loud, but I think it could, especially as we really move forward to change our short-term rental approach. Access is still a value that I hold very dear. Not only is it something that's important to me personally, the Coastal Act tells us that we are obligated to provide it. And I think that having those two approaches work in tandem not only could generate some revenue, but would be very good for us as a community to be able to say, like, yeah, we're not doing STRs, but here is how affordable access in Santa Barbara can look. So I'm really excited that that's on the table and grateful, and I would like us to pursue it. The sustainability and resilience contributions to the Measure B items, to me, I think are, I don't know if that falls in the bulk purchasing category or not, but I think that needs to, thank you, and absolutely, so that has my vote. Just two more, and then I'll stop, and we can hear from, there were a lot to love here, honestly, and so it's hard to pick just a couple. I think in conversation with our union partners, the options to change schedules seems reasonable. I hedge a little bit here because I do think that conversation needs to happen, but assuming truly voluntary means voluntary, I think, again, I agree, Ms. McAdoo, probably not going to be a huge revenue generator, but I think to present that option to our union partners and move forward in conversation with them is a good idea. And then finally, this one kind of flew under the radar, but I think that I'd like to hear my colleagues' thoughts on whether it's useful to prioritize, and that's around the business tax modernization. And it's like the most lawyerly option that I could possibly choose, because it's truly just an ordinance modernization and changing the process and system, if I understand it correctly. And I'll just then I will turn it to you, Director DeMartini. But what I like about this option is that it's looking at our own processes and our own systems and saying, how can we find efficiencies and save money? If I understand this correctly, we're not really looking to, other than cost recovery and existing fees, which maybe get adjusted, we're not saying we're going to go out and charge businesses 100x what they're paying to make this 300K. We're really talking about system efficiency. Is that true?
Councilmember Harmon, thank you so much for bringing that up, because we haven't really talked about it. So it does include that for sure. If we would move forward with what staff is recommending here, I do think it would require voter approval, because we want to completely streamline the way the business tax applies for different types of businesses. The current ordinance lays out like hundreds of individual types of businesses with individual types of tax rates. We want to completely streamline it so it's incredibly clear and more general for every type of business. And it may actually reduce taxes like overall when you look at it in totality, but it will make it so much easier for businesses and to do their annual renewal process and interact with our online tool. So it would be very seamless.
So I realize it's a bit of like maybe an unsexy option, but I'll never forget. Do you guys all remember? We were at Finance Committee, and there was the gun sales license cost like $50, and a clown had to pay $300 to get his license. And I was like, so it's cheaper to, the fortune teller, not the clown, excuse me. But it wasn't that far off, right? I will never forget that moment, just being like, this makes no sense.
There is a specific tax for a circus.
See, that's why they pay you the big bucks. So I think there's lots of positives to this, not least of which maybe right-sizing that a little bit. But also, I just, anytime we ask the public, I think, to give more and do more and pay more, I know everyone at the city feels this way. It's incumbent on us to make sure that we are as efficient and effective as possible. And I know we've got to give you the tools to do that, though. So I would really support that as well. Okay, thank you.
This reminds me of that show, Who Wants to Be a Millionaire, when you're not trying to use your lifeline, so you don't say that you want to do the departmentals.
Eric will definitely say X, Y, and Z, so I'm going to say the others.
All right, so you have your lifelines all intact. Member Santa Maria, why don't you walk us through what your thoughts are?
Thank you, Chair Friedman. Yeah, I have a couple here that were already mentioned, and then I think a few that also flew under the radar. One that I would really like to look at and get more information is, and this would be, I guess, more long-term, but the acquiring the lease and redeveloping the Harbor Restaurant into multi-use public space, public market restaurants, fish market, live music. I think that's a very promising thing that we could work towards. I mean, our waterfront being an enterprise fund really has to fend for itself. And I think as we are having the conversations about balancing our general fund, of course, all these enterprise funds also need a little help as well. So I think that's something I would want to flag, or not flag, but sort of note as something that I think would be, worth pursuing and looking into further, even if it's just to get a report on what that would look like, et cetera. I very strongly want to encourage us to look at update the real property transfer tax to a tiered progressive rate system. So polling on that. And then as far as, I know that a TOT increase was mentioned earlier. For me, I want to be careful with a TOT increase because the way I see it is we have our short-term rentals, which could be long-term housing. That's purely a choice of how you are choosing to rent it out. As a majority of council, our directions indicate that we are trying to limit short-term rentals from being short-term rentals because we would rather those be long-term housing. I would say, at least on my part, I very much want to support our existing hotels, and I am in agreement with our community when we say I don't think we need more hotels. We don't need more, but the ones that are here should be able to have that revenue generated, right? And so I think if we're pursuing a TOT tax, I would want to see the polling on pursuing that increase only for short-term rentals, because I think it could be revenue generating, but I think what's important here also is the long-term savings that as a community we would have from freeing up housing stock that was short-term into long-term. And so less of a revenue generating type of thing, but more of a behavioral change. And I mean, it could be a little bit of both, but I think we have to look far beyond just money in, money out, and it has to look at also what's also going to help the community balance. I mean, this is a community budget is the way I see it. So wanted to sort of mention that one. And then let me see, what was the other one? I have a couple more. I'm into the install RV campsites in the waterfront lets. I'm interested in that. I think that would be, of course, we would need a ton of input on that because I think it's something that, yes, could generate revenue, but again, that one I also want to be careful with because the idea is that we want to increase coastal access and for our local community first. So I would want to see sort of a local preference clause or, lower rates for people who reside within the city or the county or the state, whatever we want to put on it, right? Because we do want to make it an alternative, right, to hotels, so you don't always have to be at a pricey $600 a night hotel, right, when you come to visit Santa Barbara. But I also don't want our local community to get barred from using that newly created affordable space. And so I think like with any of these things, really making sure that the community has access to it first and foremost, and making sure that, I think as our waterfront director mentioned, I mean, it could be a good revenue generator. I mean, especially with the demand here. Let me see what else. I wrote these here. So I do think in purchasing supplies, this one's going to be kind of boring, but taking advantage of building electrification incentives, electric vehicle payment assistance, all these things I think are, anything that's going to help us meet our climate goals and we'll be able to either save or generate some revenue would be beneficial. I'll highlight a couple that I don't want to look at. I would advise us to put in the category of not pursuing at this time. So I would not want to, I don't recommend that we expand permitted short-term rentals. I think that goes contradictory to what we've been saying, and we're just going back and forth on the issue. So if we already as a council have decided to go forward with an ordinance that is being a little bit more restrictive because of our long-term housing shortage,
we should probably stay on one track, because otherwise it's really confusing. The library one, for sure, it bears repeating. I don't want to see any, I would ideally not want to see any closures or any reduction in services. And then this one I'll say that's a little bit more general, but I think anything that affects employment, a reduction, reclassification, I personally am very cautious about highlighting those as priorities at all until those conversations are had with their respective bargaining units. Because I mean, none of us who sit in this committee or on council know what it is to work these jobs day to day. We don't exactly know from lived experience what it's going to do to compact these or whatever. So I really want us to be very careful with anything that is employee or personnel related, and especially I think the voluntary 4-day a week is good. I'm wondering, is there, I don't know who this question would be for, maybe you, Ms. McAdoo, but for the 4-day work week, this may not be a reduction in costs, but is the option 4 days, 32 hours, and because that's my understanding, that's what it is. But my follow-up to that, is there an option to do 4-day 10 hours? Because, so the reason, and the reason, excuse me, the only reason I ask is because as I understand it, there's going to be cost savings, of course, in salary that isn't paid, but there's also cost savings in the closure of the building. And so where you may not necessarily reduce somebody's pay, we could still have some savings in the closure of the building. So people would still be able to complete the work. They decide to do 10-hour days instead of 8-hour days, still do 40. So just wondering if that's on the table or if that's doable.
Councilmember Santamaria, we already have a policy that allows employees to apply for an alternate work week schedule, which would be the 410 schedule. I think the request for the 32-hour work week would be more of a policy change in terms of the open hours of City Hall, and I wouldn't want to do that without sort of council input on, we're closing city facilities every Friday, and then we'd have to, again, have the conversation with the bargaining groups about implementing the 32-hour work week voluntarily. So that's the difference. So employees now can already request the 410 schedule, but again, like as you mentioned, by having the facility closed on Fridays, there may be some people who work, and probably a lot of people would, but people may opt out, and there may be also some building savings as well in that.
Thank you. That really clarifies it for me. I think
Don't go anywhere, Ms. McAdoo.
I'm almost done with my comments, I promise, Chair Friedman. The last thing I'll say is I am very cautious about the closing of our facilities in general. I mean, our constituents work, a lot of them 9 to 5s, they work all of these hours, and coming in, like, they sometimes only have a small window. Fridays are often the days when they can come in more. They have more flexibility at work. And so I think anything that has to do with City Hall closures or any sort of facility closures, I'd really want us to do very extensive public outreach, because we need to understand what that impact would be and how do we mitigate that, because we have to meet our community somewhere in the middle. And then the last thing I wanted to say is I would be in support of the cannabis tax increase. I think that seems, I mean, if the voters already approved it, then I think it's just going to be a matter of, we make sure the stakeholders are aware, there is, information going out, and folks know that it's coming. My only question to that would be, how quick does that get implemented, or how quickly does that change?
I was going to say, if we did an ordinance, as was recommended by the city attorney, it'd be a first reading, introduction, and then adoption, and then 30 days to be effective. So, I mean, we could come back relatively quickly to council with that, assuming we wanted to do some outreach. So that could happen probably in a couple months in short order.
And how long would it take to craft the ordinance, you said?
I mean, I think that would be a question for the city attorney's office,
Yeah, thank you, Councilmember Santamaria. So I don't think it would be particularly difficult. So we could probably, get it out fairly quickly. It would most likely go to ordinance committee first. But I think we could do it in a, relatively short period of time. It wouldn't be, I don't think it would be too difficult.
Yeah, that we've
But
already-
again, we would need to do, a little more research into all of these issues, but,
And the outreach, I'm assuming.
Yeah, and I think
yeah,
that
we
we've
would-
already adopted the cannabis tax, so that's already been implemented once, so this is simply to raise the rate. It's not setting up the policy and program around it. So that's sort of why it could be a little bit quicker, I
Makes it
think.
easier. Okay, perfect. Thank you. Those.
Simply
oh,
also,
yes.
we would have to notify the cannabis businesses as well.
Right,
give
that's what I
them
figured about
advance
outreach.
notice about,
Yeah.
you know, changing the tax rate and make sure the remittance form is updated, you know, support them through that process too.
Yeah, how long does that transition process take?
I think the city administrator said it would could take 30 days. We would just have to kind of lay that out, make sure, maybe we would consider 60 days to make sure that the businesses understand it, that they implement it. We recently completed an audit of all of the cannabis businesses in the city. It went fairly well, but we've learned through that audit that it's really hard communicating with these businesses about tax rates and remittance forms and changes to remittance forms. So we have to just consider all that work as part of this change.
Right. Okay, thank you.
Hey, just a comment on the proposal to go to four days, especially at City Hall. As if it is something that we do consider, I think it's worth at least having the discussion. It doesn't have to go right away. One of the concerns is noticing for council, finance, and ordinance committee meetings, because if City Hall is closed Friday, so the public and we as council, we get all the staff reports that Thursday. And by the time you read them, if City Hall is closed Friday, then you have the weekend, then staff comes back on Monday, and they're gonna have a bunch of questions from council, a bunch of questions from the public, and there really isn't that amount of time. So as part, to really have that public input, so we would need to look at when we put the agenda reports out for council meetings, possibly even backing that up an entire week or so that there is enough time for us as council members to be able to engage with staff. Because if they're not there on that Friday, and I haven't even looked at it till Friday or Saturday.
Well, and I think, you know, we already do that with every other Friday that's closed.
Yeah.
And we seem to make it work. But, you know, obviously we'd look at all of that. To Councilmember Santa Maria's comment about customer service, I agree. You know, one of my concerns is, you know, that access. And so maybe if we did close on Fridays, looking at having one evening a week where it was, you know, City Hall or the permit center was open later in the evening, we could have someone flex schedule so there was someone there to, you know, answer questions. So I think there's other ways to address the customer service concerns, but I definitely hear that concern, even with our existing hours.
Okay, perfect. So, good question. So I'm gonna fly through mine so we can get to the fun part, the nose, and then we'll try to see if we can make sense of this and get some motions. So first, yes, supportive of the cannabis and the proposal that that's where the backfill would come from at some point. The one caveat with that is there's a range. I think we're at 6% right now. The upper end is 20, but we need to find that sweet spot because what we don't want to do is impact it so that if we overshoot it, we actually get less revenue or other impacts. So we need to find out what that sweet spot is. But I'll leave that to staff. Specific tax measures, I do support having a poll and then having that information come to council for next year's ballot. In particular, where my colleagues are, the library, parcel tax, the real property. The TOT, I think there's a lot of challenges with that, especially if you talk with some of our partners, Visit Santa Barbara and others. It's a little bit different. There's two on there. There's one that was the short-term vacation rental, which is separate from the TOT. I think the short-term vacation rental, there's a lot of questions on that. So to the extent that we could limit it to those three that we talked about, but I am open to additional. I agree with Councilmember Harmon on the vacancy tax. We haven't had that full discussion with the community on what it really is. And so if you did a poll and it came in as the highest one, that kind of would skew the poll one way or the other. And there isn't really enough time to do the proper outreach on a vacancy tax versus something that is a behavior change versus something that is a service delivery like a library parcel or a real property transfer, which could go in there. And as part of that, looking at both general but specific tax where it's a dedicated and see if any of those poll at or near the 2/3 on that, because I think that's an important distinction, especially since we're looking at where's housing going to come from. The library parcel tax could be specific to libraries, so we want to understand that 2/3 threshold versus just a 50% plus one. The RVs I was mixed on. I'm glad that I asked the question because the answer that our waterfront director, Mr. Wilshire, gave was great. And then we have an authority on the Coastal Commission here who raised some good points. And the other thing I would say with that is we are losing a lot of just families that used to come to Santa Barbara because they cannot afford the hotels. And I'll just give a quick example. Years ago when I was really involved with outrigger paddling and the team hosts a race, people would come up from all of Southern California and they'd stay 1 or 2 nights. A lot of times now, they come up from San Diego and they go back the same day. And it happens in San Diego too because the rates are just the same as you get up at 2 in the morning, you drive down to San Diego, you race and you drive back. And so you're not getting to experience those towns because you can't afford a weekend of $1,000 for a room for 2 nights. So this would be an option that might actually bring families back into our community. And along with that too, I also support a prioritization of the West Beach Master Plan. That could definitely generate some revenue. And also, I think it was around 2010, if I recall, when I was on the Harbor Commission. It's actually why I got on the Harbor Commission, is there was a West Beach Master Plan update. I don't know if it's been updated since then, but there was a lot of good input on how we could maximize West Beach for some of this, including opportunities to really take advantage of the paddling sports and the Chumash, who have been looking for ways to bring their tomos back to West Beach and be part of that whole area with the seashells and the outriggers and the Chumash. And it's all in the master plan. There's designs that they put together, the outrigger team put together, that could really be something that would be unique on the West Coast. And it's all in again, I think it's the 2010 master plan, but there was architectural designs for all that's in there. So it's something I think worth bringing back again. I'm supportive of looking at the voluntary 4-day week. We just had that discussion. And then I think those are the other ones that I have. There's other things I support. Of course, the switch over from the reallocation from the different enterprise funds, taking on some of those roles for things from Measure B or from the waterfront with parks partnerships on some of those things like that as well. So I'm sure Mr. DiMartini has been keeping a list of those, so we'll come back at that. But now let's move it on to some of the things that we do not recommend at this time. Member Harmon.
Okay, no's. Thank you. I do not recommend converting 90-minute parking to paid parking. I think we had that conversation and it didn't go well. I don't think we should reinitiate it. I also don't recommend seeking reimbursement for public safety and other costs related to special events. And I say this for a couple of reasons. One, I don't think we do enough special events here. I think we need, I think more special events means more people in our downtown core, more revenue, and just life and joy and engagement. And I think the nonprofit partners who are putting these events on are already, they're telling us month after month that it's getting more challenging to do them. And Chair Friedman, talks about this often, the festivals that we used to have that we don't have anymore. So to me, I'd like to deprioritize that as a general matter. There may be specific festivals that can shoulder that burden, and we have that conversation in a one-off way. But broadly speaking, I just think it's a bit in conflict to do this with the general message we're sending to the community, which is we want more engagement, we want more activity, more, and we're your partner in it. So I would personally deprioritize that. And then the other 3 are ones that have been mentioned by both colleagues already. Not supportive of extending the library closure. Share Councilmember Santamaria and Chair Friedman's, I think Chair Friedman, definitely Councilmember Santamaria's comments about just concern over holding positions vacant, eliminating positions, reorganizations generally. I think those are conversations that need to be had with our union partners and just understanding the implications. So I guess I don't know that it's necessarily a deprioritization so much as I think the focus really needs to be in having those conversations. I don't know that I'm equipped to say yes or no at this moment without that feedback. And I think it's a longer process, a longer series of engagements that need to happen, and so it's a no unless and until we really engage in through those channels. And then lastly, I think I have another one, but the only other one I happened to write down was I too am not in favor of expanding permitted short-term rentals. Thanks, Chair Friedman.
All right. Member Santa Maria.
Thank you, Chair Friedman. I'll be repeating a few that Committee Member Harmon said, so got some alignment here. Also not in favor of expanding short-term rentals. As I've stated previously, it feels like it contradicts what we have decided as a council. Anything that has to do with contracting out, I would deprioritize. That always has a huge impact on our staff, and again, it's the same as reorganizing and holding positions vacant. Contracting out will greatly affect the bargaining units, so that needs to be discussed. And in my opinion, contracting out shouldn't even be something that we do. It should be something that, we should be trying to do things in-house as much as possible. It's only going to support our own workforce. Mentioned this earlier, but definitely not in favor of the library closures. Really want to make sure that we are protecting our libraries. And then let me double check here. I am iffy on the closure of City Hall and other facilities. I think it's worth discussing if we are going to do that, but I would caution against that. Let's see. I tried to be positive and not have too many no's. Oh, I will give one that's a little bit more general, but I think, a lot of these are, requests for proposals are fines, but I think when we get into consultants, I feel like it just leaves a sour taste in people's mouths every time we say yet another consultant. And I think there's a few in here that I see, hiring a consultant to take on certain projects, and staff limitation is very, very real. So I think we're going to have to make some difficult choices about projects we will prioritize and deprioritize, and such like the conversation we're having today. But I think, with how tight our budget is right now, we should be looking as consultants as one of the last resorts, because we just don't have the money. If we had, excess money, I'd say, sure, yeah, bring them all in. But, a lot of that expertise is already here. Our staff has dedicated so many years of service, and, our community, have lived their lives here. I think there's a lot of that wealth of knowledge that's already here. The last one is, let me see, drum roll, please. Just kidding. Reorganization of staffing. Yeah, is I would say. Oh, there's another one that I saw it and then I can't find it anymore. But there was one about the eliminating the reduced nonprofit rate for facility rentals. I don't see that anywhere here, but I would very much be against. I could have sworn I saw it earlier. If it's in there, I would really want to deprioritize that, because I think our local nonprofits and community groups barely have the ability to use our city facilities as is. And so I just want to make sure that, even with the reduced nonprofit rate, that it's already, a cost burden to a lot of these groups. So I would say anything that has to do with removing that reduced rate. I understand why we charge for the facilities, obviously, but I wouldn't be in favor of charging nonprofit groups at a market rate, for reasons listed. Thank you.
Thank you. I actually noted that too. I'm glad you brought it up. It's in the revenue generation under the rentals. It's a $5,000 fee. So I actually support, because there are certain circumstances where we would want to waive it and have that flexibility to do it rather than codify that in a policy. So I'm going to fly through this so we can get to the motions and get back to council on time. Also, don't support the increase of the pay in the parking. To me, that shouldn't even come back to council until after the State Street Master Plan is adopted in the future, because then you can tie that into improvements long-term with the master plan, so everybody understands what the vision is and why we're increasing the parking rates for the revenue generation. And it'll just put that on the back burner. I don't really support also tangential to that, making the city hall lot after hours in the evening. The revenue's minimal, but there is, sometimes you come on the weekend, it's full, and I think you would have fewer people coming downtown. And that one just allows people to come downtown and go right to the businesses that are right there. And I think it'd be more counterproductive. The festivals, I also agree with that. Some of those festivals, they'd either have to start charging for people to attend, or they would eat the cost, and we'd have fewer festivals. So that, the library closure, already spoke to that. This one is a yes, no. It's, yes, I support looking at moving the city's attorney's office into a city building or somewhere else. But just not into my office. I'll take the blame, but. But that's a long term. I think the lease that we currently have goes through 2031, so it's not even something on the front burner. But I do think that there could be some cost savings if we looked at another location than where it's at. But again, that's a few years out anyways. But there is a sense with the council offices of the public having access to us, and to not have the offices to be able to meet and do our work when we need to. We don't know who's going to be on the council in the future. They might not have a home situation where they can have a computer, have a quiet space where they go. I'm in there a lot of times on Sundays myself, just studying for council meetings. So there's a public expectation in its delivery of being accessible that comes with having the offices. So also don't support the issue with the crossing guards of just having the school districts pick that up because of the history with that. What ends up happening is the school district has its own budget challenges, and then those crossing guards end up being on the chopping block. And I don't want to do that to our fellow colleagues over at the school district, who would be the ones to have those public comments. But then the moment that gets on the agenda, then you get a lot of angry parents, rightfully so, especially in September and August when school starts. So I'm not supportive of that. Also, no to the T-bid. That they just went through that. That was a hard-fought initiative by Visit Santa Barbara and others, and it was controversial among the hoteliers, but they came together. So I don't think reopening that right now at this time is appropriate. Also, no to the STR expansion. And then in terms of the poll, I, again, don't support on the poll, assuming that we give some direction. We don't have to make a motion, but a direction. I wouldn't support including a vacancy tax on the poll. I would try to limit it to the library, the rental property transfer tax, and the general TOT, just to get those numbers, and if there's any others on there. But I do support having the conversation about what a vacancy tax is for a later discussion at some point. So I don't want to take it off completely. And then for the vacant positions, holding positions vacant for cost savings, definitely understand Mr. Smith's comments earlier and my colleagues, but that is a tool that our city administrator and the staff need to use at times when the budget situation even gets worse than now. So we really need to leave it to her discretion on positions to leave vacant, and that is not a permanent fix. And we're trying to get to a permanent fix, but that is a short-term fix when we don't have very many options to continue to have the service delivery that we have. So I would ask that we not take that off of that, but that put it in the recommendations and use as sparingly as possible, but not eliminate the option to do that, because it is very important. It comes with budgeting 101 when you go through tough times, and I remember studying that when I was at Cal State Northridge in budgeting. So I would ask that we leave that to the discretion of the city administrator. So with that, Mr. DiMartini, all right, so we're going to go through, well, how do you recommend we go from here?
Chairman Friedman, can I make a suggestion too? If it's too difficult to craft motions, the recommendation is just simply to provide direction and feedback to staff regarding your wants and not wants, which you have really clearly laid out from each of you. So, if it's too difficult to come together on motions, we've kind of got the direction we need, I think.
Well, if you feel you have the direction, a lot of these we're in a complete agreement on.
Yeah.
Yes, yeah.
Okay.
Just to reiterate, yeah, I agree with the city attorney. I think there were three priorities that each of you mentioned, which was increasing the cannabis tax to 20% or an amount that seems appropriate. Polling for tax measures, definitely the property transfer tax and the library parcel tax. Two of you indicated the TOT and one of you did not, so there's, a little bit of a disagreement there, but not necessarily. And then also the RV campsites. All three of you mentioned all three of those. And then on the no's, I think most of you mentioned the library closure, not wanting to pursue that, not expanding the short-term rental permitting, and then not increasing parking fees. So those are consistency across all three of you, so that also helps us.
Okay, perfect. And then you could mention some of the other ones that came up when it comes to council. At the end of the discussion.
Absolutely.
Okay, so we can just do one motion to move forward the staff recommendations to council with incorporation of the comments of the committee. All right,
And with regard, sorry, to the polling, since that's not on the agenda, then I think that you should add that separately and just recommend that the city administrator pursue those polling options.
do we need a motion for the polling,
No.
or can we just
No.
verbally?
Yeah, that's just
Okay.
encourage the city administrator to take that on.
Okay, so let's do the motion first, and then we'll do the question of the polling. So is there a motion for that, the staff recommendation, incorporation of our comments?
Okay, do you want me to incorporate that direction around polling into the recommendations?
No, I would keep that separate.
We'll just do a straw poll, because we don't actually need an official motion, and it's not agendized for that, so, yeah.
Correct.
I'll move staff recommendation.
With the comment, with the feedback
Yeah.
to the full council. Is there a second?
Second.
Motion's been made and seconded. Everyone understand the motion? Mr. DiMartini, all in favor? Aye. No opposed, no abstentions, passes unanimously. And now just, not for an official motion, but I'm comfortable with giving feedback to our city administrator to pursue a poll. Any comments on that?
I agree.
My only comment would be if in the poll we could look at what a TOT tax in general would look like versus a TOT tax for short-term rentals only. That would be my only comment, yeah.
Fine with that? Okay. And we're not taking a motion on that. So with that, our meeting is adjourned. Thank you, everyone. Thank you to all our staff for putting this together. It was great work. Thank you.